He told you don't get near the glass.
Yes, he did. Clarice Starling.
Mm-hmm. Nice to meet you, Clarice. You can hang your coat up there if you like.
Oh, actually, I will.
He's past the others. The last cell, you keep to the right. I put out a chair for you.
Oh, yes, that's very good, thank you.
I'll be watching. You'll do fine.
Oh, there she is. The almost birthday girl. Oh.
I'm George.
I'm Devyn.
And this is your 19th appointment with your Medicinema.
Today, we're going to talk about Longlegs and Silence of the Lambs. But first, a bit of housekeeping.
As some very sensitive listeners might have already picked up on, our voices may sound a little different because we switched up our recording times. Until now, due to our geographical location and time zones, we recorded these on my mornings and Devyn's evenings. Moving forward, starting today, this will be flipped, so this is my evening voice.
And this is my morning voice, and we hope you get used to it. As we record this, Venice International Film Festival is happening, and Toronto International Film Festival is about to start, so expect a big news bit about that in the next 2 weeks. But for this appointment, we'll directly move on to the movies, starting with 1991's Silence of the Lambs by Jonathan Demme.
In the classic psychological thriller Silence of the Lambs, we follow FBI agent Clarice Starling, played by Jodie Foster, as she investigates the murders of serial killer Buffalo Bill, played by Simon Northwood, and consults imprisoned serial killer Hannibal Lecter, played by Anthony Hopkins, on the case. Throughout the story, she has to not only get into the mind of Buffalo Bill, but also try to guard herself from Hannibal Lecter trying to get into her mind. In a kind of twisty ending, she manages to capture Buffalo Bill, but in the process of sentencing deals given to Hannibal Lecter, he got a chance for a gory escape. Devyn, what's your general thoughts on Silence of the Lambs?
I saw this when I was younger, and I really liked it then, and it was like a classic staple of the psychological thrillers and like your police-style horror or whatever, detective horror. And I actually have better memories of the sequels of this movie than I actually do of it. But I did rewatch this. It is not nearly as good as I remember it. I think this is such a strong case of a character being more culturally impactful than the actual film itself. The movie to me is honestly kind of boring. It's corny. I think there's a lot of really corny things. The entire premise is kind of cheesy. Like, they're the only way they can crack the case is this guy, okay. But he's just playing games with them. He knows the dude's name. He knows where he's at. They're just like playing his mind games the entire movie to get him to open up or whatever. And that's super not real world at all. That's not how the real world works. But the character, Hannibal Lecter is such a powerhouse of a character beyond Anthony Hopkins, beyond any of that. The psychologist that is a killer is like a motif almost created by this character. So I think it has a lot of cultural impact in horror, even though I don't think it actually was the greatest movie.
I remember also loving this more than I do nowadays. But I still think I enjoy it more than you, apparently. I still think it's a fantastically crafted film, and I am definitely not bored by rewatching it nowadays. I do think its impact definitely goes beyond even the character of Hannibal Lecter.
Mm-hmm.
And the kind of trope this almost created even in horror with, consulting a serial killer is something that came, is almost a 12 Angry Men situation all over again, where everyone has seen a kind of Silence of the Lambs story, even if you haven't seen the movie.
Yes, exactly what it feels like. Yeah, everybody, like it's, yeah.
Mm-hmm. It is definitely that kind of tropey nowadays. Due to its own, influence. But I also think like a big part of this was the female hero. Like this was a big movie culturally speaking when it came to a strong female character that isn't also just another, written as if it was a dude and it just happens to be a woman that's badass, but she is both a strong woman and still a woman. The movie addresses it. The movie, it works through the sexism and stuff like that with it directly addresses it visually, even in scenes. So yeah, it was definitely a big cultural impactful movie in that regard as well, I'd say. I actually didn't rewatch the movie regularly. I rewatched it with the commentary track, which was an interesting one, actually. It's not just the director or just the cast or anything. It had the director, the writer of the screenplay. It's adapted from a book, but the guy who adapted it. It also had Jodie Foster and Anthony Hopkins. And it even had the former FBI agent that they also had as a consultant on set, kind of when it came to FBI interactions to, ask how stuff like that would go down, how they would proceed step by step. So it has some sort of realism to it. And he was also there in the commentary track to comment on some of the, how things would go down in real life. So it's interesting that you already kind of brought up the way you feel like it doesn't portray reality.
Oh, I mean, that's why they have a consultant, because they're trying to make it seem as real as possible.
Yeah.
You can have a consultant on and be like, hey, would this really happen? And they'd be like, no, that would never happen. And like, well, if it did, how would it have happened, though?
Yeah, that's kind of the situation. But I loved it. I honestly enjoyed it a lot. It's kind of the what if kind of storytelling.
Yeah, it is. It is. Coincidentally, watching both of the movies that we're going to cover today, I've recently started playing a game called Alan Wake 2, and it very much feels like it fits right in the middle of these. Like this is like a trilogy or something. Like it's very, and I feel like even that wouldn't have existed maybe without the influences this movie had. So, I mean, it can definitely be felt, but I think like a lot of really great things that are so influential from so long ago, in reality and in comparison to what we live in modern times with, it has aged very badly. I usually don't like to think like this, but there are times where it happens, like now, where it's hard for me to look at it and be like, this was the first one that did this. This is the first one that did this. And not just like, man, so many other things have done this so much better since then. That was kind of my big struggle with this movie, was just there were a lot of things that I'm like, it's just there's so many better things now that are saying and doing the exact same things this movie did. But that stands to its, its influence is what it is.
I'm interested in do you think of specific examples of a kind of Silence the Lambs story with the whole consulting the serial killer and things like that you would prefer to this? Because to me, it is kind of a situation that I think I only really also have with maybe time loop movies and Groundhog Day, where I almost feel like the first instance of it that started the whole movement, basically the whole new subgenre, already did it the best. And I don't think, like, to me personally, it just didn't really age, and to me it is still the best kind of Silence the Lambs story. I feel like
there's so many because I really like police, like detective horror. There's just too many things. Like I'd have to like Condemned Criminal Origins for the Xbox is a game that has a story that's similar with the, dealing with the serial killers to try to catch a serial killer or whatever. Fantastic fucking shit.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't be surprised if there are episodes of Law and Order that have done this exact thing, that have, just as much conviction
for sure.
and shit,
I remember watching animated TV show on Nickelodeon as a kid, and I couldn't even tell you what exactly it was. That did a Silence of the Lambs kind of episode with a kid, just, I don't know, being...
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. So I don't think I could point to you to be like, this is the ones that are doing it better. I just...
Mm-hmm. Just a general feeling of you have seen this done better
It's
before.
it's almost like saying like somebody put cream cheese on a bagel once and they did it really, really, really good. And it made everybody go, what else can I put on that? And maybe you still like the cream cheese in a bagel, but maybe you like cream cheese in a bagel with jalapenos on it, like I think it just depends on which iteration of the thing you connected with more, or what, as we'll get to later, if it was paranormal or not, if it was more realistic, if it was,
Mhm.
there's all kinds of things that go into it. But it doesn't make this movie bad. I just think certain things about it are aged. I wouldn't mind getting into it a little bit, by the way. She's leaving the place and the other cellmate is masturbating.
Mhm.
And she takes that shot with such fucking professionalism. Holy shit. I cannot believe that. I would have been screaming. I don't care how professionally, you would have been screaming the second or gagging, or like, no, I just.
Interesting point to start off. To me, like I like the whole scene leading up to that moment is her putting as many guards up as possible and not letting any emotions out. And I think she's at that moment just still in that mode of just
That's
don't
fair.
show any reaction.
No, that makes a lot of sense, honestly. It just took me as like
Took you off guard.
yeah, like it's just, in modern movies somebody would have been like, what the fuck? Do you know what I mean? There would have been much more
Yeah.
reaction to it in a modern setting or whatever, which isn't a bad thing, I feel like in modern movies, strong female lead that happens to, they would have like flung it back into the cell or something like that and told him to fuck off or something. Do you know what I mean? Like,
I know what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm like, I think, but at that point we're just talking about preferred approaches, I guess.
That's
like
true.
this
That's true too.
is a very minimal approach
Yes.
to the whole
Yes.
situation. Keeping the composure is also a kind of grace, or a
This is
kind
true.
of, yeah, I'm not gonna show you the reaction you want. I'm above this. So it's still kind of, a strong moment, I guess, for the character, just in a very different approach.
Okay, then I do have my second thing is an actual dig on the movie, though. This is
Okay, go
a
ahead.
very real dig on this film. We talk a lot about, the technical parts of films and the skill and the craftsmanship that goes into making a movie, and the level of as close as you can get to objective good or bad filmmaking, right? With skill.
Sure.
Jodie Foster has been in movies since she was like 8 or something like that. She has been in movies since she was a child. We have on film what Jodie Foster looks like as a child.
Oh man, you're really
Why the fuck does the little kid version of her in this movie look literally nothing like her? Nothing
Oh my God,
like her.
that's
No, it's not. It's not. It's actually not. Because you watch that scene, and if you haven't seen the movie before, it takes a minute for you to realize that that's even supposed to be her as a kid. Like it doesn't cut away like a dream sequence. It doesn't. No,
it's kind of the equivalent of a first world problem, just with like movie nerds. If you have seen too many movies,
it's a total movie nerd thing. Yeah.
Like if you have seen too many movies, that scene might be ruined for you as seen through the eyes of Devyn.
What's funny though is as I started saying it, you knew exactly what I was talking about, because you must have also been sitting there going, that looks nothing like Jodie Foster.
Yeah, a little bit, but it wasn't an issue to me. It was like a half-second thought that I instantly pushed away and didn't care about anymore. And it was mostly like my reaction was like, "Oh my God, you really like paid attention to that."
Well, because you know what it is for me is that when movies live in grounded existence, like this is obviously fictional, right?
Mm-hmm.
But this is something that could happen theoretically, right? This isn't like aliens came or vampires walked the earth, type shit, right? If you're going to ground your movie in reality, I have a hard time not like over analyzing that reality of it. We're going to look at the reality of it. Like the things I picked on with this movie for sure are I'm already looking at my list going, okay, maybe I was a bit pedantic with shit. At one point they mentioned that death's head moths only come from Asia, and I'm like, bitch, no, they don't. They come from Europe and Africa. What are you doing? Like, like it's shit like that. Yeah, if you're gonna be realistic at me, you're gonna be like a real movie. Be real. I don't know. I'm pedantic, I guess. I'm picky. I'm nitpicky with this one.
Yeah, it seems like with this one. I'm already looking forward to trying to defend a still great movie. I think the geography of Dr. Lecter is just incredibly well done. Like the way through this long dialogue shot between Jodie Foster's character and the prison guard boss, whatever kind of character, we really get a feeling for the incredible danger of this man. They go down multiple flights of stairs, followed by multiple layers of gates, each guarded on their own with like their own keymaster, basically. It gives this almost feeling of like there's this demigod at the end of the tunnel.
They do at that moment, because I have a point about it later. They do bring up that why she needs to be so far away is because the last guard that got too close, and then they show her pictures, and they're like,
oh yeah,
they were able to recover one of their eyes and stuff like that, and like it was like they mauled them greatly or whatever in like 10 seconds or something.
So I guess they both go the dialogue route and the visual route, but just like even if you would take away the the audio part of it, just the visual part remaining, it would still feel super threatening and imposing, whatever is there at the end waiting for her. And that's just well done.
Here's a question that I wondered about, like, because I thought about this a little bit too, with like how deep they go down to this whole dungeon, right?
Mm-hmm.
What does this say about the other prisoners also kept in this dungeon? Like, he's not at the end of the line because he's the worst. He's at the end of the line because that's just where his cell is, right? Miggs, the dude who, like, does his business, he's in the same position. Does this mean that they are as bad as him?
I would assume it means it's almost as bad, yeah.
Yeah.
Even within that part of the prison, he's still in the very last cell, and his cell is the only one not having bars, but only like little tiny breathing holes, basically, and otherwise like a full-on glass wall. Like he still has a one-up to the rest of them.
That's fair. But yeah, they go to the storage unit. She finds the head and stuff. And it was interesting to me that you don't then see any type of investigation happen at there. It's just like, oh, we found a head, and then we're going to move completely on to going back and talking to Hannibal Lecter about this and stuff, right? When it seems like that's a huge jump in this case, and that would be like the main focus is, oh, we found fucking physical evidence. We should be working with that. And it's kind of a theme that follows through with this movie, is that I noticed is that we don't often focus on the actual things that get him caught. I mean, we do to a degree. At the end, we see the big switcheroo or whatever, but like, a lot of those actions actually happen in the background of her. She just feeds in info, and then other people are making those deductions and making that footwork.
Yeah, I think it's interesting too. I think it's just like a decision of where they put the focus. She's almost like the spearhead of this investigation, and other people will take care of then the fine details, I guess.
It's interesting because I almost felt like more like she was a mere consultant to the investigation.
I mean, it's almost both, right? Because due to the switcheroo, she is definitely acting as a consultant and just like doing her own investigation on the side and just giving information to the others, who then also have to do additional work. As you already pointed out, someone had to, take all the evidence there and check out the storage unit and see what else is there. But at the same time, she then, I guess, in the switcheroo, turns into the spearhead of the investigation.
That's fair, yeah. She's definitely at the head of it, for sure.
I would assume a lot of those things are in the novel, and it's probably just a matter of adaptation to cut them out.
Cutting out the fat.
Yeah, because you need to get rid of some stuff. It's still a pretty lengthy movie, you know.
What was your thing on the garage?
Yeah, one of the first kind of cameo moments is in that scene. There's a surprising high amount of cameos in this movie of just like friends and crew members. Ed Saxton, one of the producers of this movie, had his head molded. The decapitated head they find there is the head of one of the producers of the movie.
I always love that in video games. Oftentimes, like NPCs that are like soldiers that you kill or whatever, and like if you're like playing a horror game and you walk through a hallway and there's like a dead person on the ground and they're like mauled or whatever, you have to pull a key out of their rib cage or some weird shit.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times those are like developers or like developers' wives or husbands or parents even, and like I always love that kind of stuff.
One thing that someone pointed out in the commentary track, and I wish I remembered who it was. Apparently, on set, someone had the idea to put the American flag as like a cover over the car, just with the idea of to connect it all to the history and how deep violence is rooted in American history.
Okay. Just stacking the symbols on. I actually have a thing about that, just stacking the symbols onto this character. We'll actually, I think, get into that in a minute. My next thing is literally all the way when we're now seeing Buffalo Bill in like the ditch and stuff. I'm jumping way far, by the way, so I don't know if you've got other stuff in between.
I definitely have some stuff before. The writer talked about the origins of Buffalo Bill as a character, particularly in the scene where we see him kidnap the one girl that is like trapped then for the rest of the movie. It's basically an amalgamation of 3 real serial killers.
John Wayne Gacy, Ed Gein, and Ted Bundy.
What was the first one?
John Wayne Gacy.
That one's wrong. You were right on the other 2. It's Gary Hidenick.
Oh, I don't know that one.
Yeah, I didn't either.
I'm just guessing, by the way, based on my serial killer knowledge and what that would be.
Yeah, but Ted Bundy was waiting in front of libraries. He used to drop books and had like a fake cast on his arm with which he would knock out women trying to be helpful and, helping him out with his books.
Mm-hmm.
Which is, taken here with, I think he drops like a sofa or something that he's like trying to load onto his bus. And he also has the cast arm.
He gets her to get into it and like pushes it in, and then he just quite literally just punches her in the face like 4 times, and then she just like goes unconscious. But yeah. Gary
Hidenick had a pit in his cellar where he would put 3 women at a time, but he had also water down there and would like electrocute them.
Oh shit.
Yeah, and Ed Gein wanted to replace his mother, basically. Killed and skinned older women, wore their skin and like wigs, and tried to recreate his dead mother. So those are like the 3 major influences on the character of Buffalo Bill.
Only because he's my favorite serial killer. Only because he's my favorite. Will I correct and mention that Ed Gein, however one wants to pronounce it, he's from fucking Gainesville, Florida, so it's not like he was, pronouncing German names correctly, probably. His mother would constantly, when she was alive, tell him that other people's love wasn't real, and that the only love that ever would exist was the love that she had inside of her for him, and vice versa. And then when she died, she told him that she'll always be inside of him and like be in his heart and in his soul and stuff. And he was very broken, very deranged, and he took that way too literally.
Yeah, makes sense.
And quite literally tried to put other people in. He ate people too. He tried to put people inside of himself and then wear the skin of other people to try to find a way to be close to them. And then he did make like a doll that resembled his mom out of skin, but he also made belts made out of nipples, lampshades for his like living room, and like couch cover duvets and shit, and like he made a lot of things out of skin. He's also probably one of the most famous inspirational serial killers to film because it's also the basis of Psycho. Takes
Makes sense
from his story, and so does Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Also take from his story. He's probably the most influential serial killer into film that I can think of.
Yeah, that's wild.
The more you know.
Little weird trivia. Gene Hackman was originally supposed to direct this. As far as I can tell, he never ended up directing anything. This would have been his first movie, and he just decided not to, I guess. He wouldn't even just directed it, but he also wanted to play Hannibal Lecter, apparently. So that
I could see that.
That's a fucking wild parallel universe existing there somewhere. A Gene Hackman directed Silence of the Lambs with him playing Hannibal Lecter himself.
I mean, I'd watch it.
Yeah, for sure. That's the kind of case for if AI ever gets good enough, then I'll feed it that prompt probably.
Yeah, right. I want to see that movie.
Just to check out what it looks like in the parallel universe. I think it is the second time she kind of consults with Hannibal Lecter. I love how he looks away when asking for her father, almost as if her pain is too much for him to fully take on face on. I couldn't quite figure out what else it would like try to represent, but yeah, it's such an interesting visual of we have the camera behind him and he looks at us instead of her when asking about her most painful trauma, I guess, or tries to, poke for that trauma that she's still not revealing really. I wonder if it's either him trying to not feel too much of her pain, or if it's more about him looking in our direction.
I don't remember the scene as well. I didn't pick up on that little cue. I don't know. I don't think he sees pain for other people like that, honestly.
Yeah, because it usually feels more like even if, then it's more so that he feeds on the pain, like he's seeking out that pain. So why would he look away? I could see it as him almost showing respect to her. The way they kind of interact with each other is almost as if he's happy that he found another intellectual who's actually a sort of a challenge to him, I guess. He seems very entertained by trying to crack this nut, basically, which for once has a little bit of resistance to offer. So it could be a thing of him showing respect, but I could also see it as almost him staring at us to almost remind us we are also part of this deep trauma digging that he's doing right now. I'm not sure. There's definitely ways to lay it out, and I'm not fully sure what the intent was.
I mean, maybe he's disgusted with trying to be so sweet. No, I'm just joking. He's a therapist.
Very sweet guy.
Yeah. So the pit's got a lot of things going on. This is kind of when we first really get introduced to Buffalo Bill as an actual character, and we really start seeing him.
Mm-hmm.
I am not in the world enough to have a viewpoint or an opinion that matters on this, but I do have enough of a worldview to recognize that it's a question that I think should be asked or whatever, right? I'm not quite sure if his character is offensive or not.
I also have that point on my list. Yeah. And I have some feelings.
I feel like it is, but at the same time, like I understand that with the history of mental illness accusations and stuff about being trans, why creating movies where trans people are crazy is a bad move. I get that.
Yeah.
But it also is silly to say that a group of people can never have a character made about them in a certain way because of history. No, that's the way that. Oh no, I shouldn't say that because that is still
because it's gray
areas. Yeah, there's gray areas with every single problematic thing has its own gray areas, right?
Yeah,
So
and
I don't know.
The problem out of the perspective of like the trans community is more so, I feel like, that for the most part, this was pretty much the only way in which they would ever be represented. So it's, it's this stigmatization. It's the like it's the White Lives Matter thing of like, we need White History Month. Well, that's just normal history. You don't need to fight for that. So yeah, I totally see that point. At the same time, my kind of feeling why I still feel mixed about it, and why I at least think it came from no bad intentions, is that in the dialogue where she talks to Hannibal Lecter about Buffalo Bill's dressing up, cross-dressing.
He says that he thinks he is, but he isn't.
He thinks he is, but he absolutely isn't. And it very much fits into a larger theme of this movie, which is just feeling comfortable in your own skin.
I almost took that as more derogatory, because it was almost like a person not believing that person's issue.
I don't think that is it, just because it's like this major theme of the movie of skin. As Hannibal puts it, he says that Buffalo Bill just feels uncomfortable in his skin, and that's why he tries to grow into another skin, basically. The whole thing he makes is a dress of skin.
Yeah.
Like one of the big things she finds on her own investigation is like those nude Polaroid portraits of the first victim, showing a lot of skin, quite literally. So the whole theme of being uncomfortable in your own skin is such a major part that I fully believe it, that Hannibal just means, yeah, he's absolutely delusional and he feels uncomfortable in his own skin because he is so delusional, but he just takes the wrong takeaway from that by thinking, okay, there's these people that also feel uncomfortable in the skin they were born in, so surely I'm one of these people.
Two big things. First off, all the way up until the very end, Hannibal Lecter lied. Okay, first off, he consistently lied about something. He always changed the truth to better his situation every time in an effort to basically get out, right? He always lied, okay? And the second thing is that we do see Buffalo Bill in a couple really intimate scenes of just him in the mirror. And that dude is feeling himself. That dude is so feeling his moment at those. He's telling himself like, I'd fuck me so hard and shit. Like, and that's him looking at himself through that window. Like I was going to ask you a question about that eventually too, but he's doing the tuck and stuff. And like, he's feeling it. So I don't know. I think that he does think that. I think he does feel that way. I think that those are moments where he is feeling comfortable with his skin. Which is why I think he wanted to wear women's skin. This is why I think this might be offensive, is because that's his way of externalizing that he's born in the wrong body. So the only way that he could go about it is by murdering people and wearing their skin. And that's like, saying that, that's whatever, how a trans person would handle this. I feel like that's where you become, this is an offensive line.
Yeah. Yeah, I can totally see that way of looking at it, for sure. Like, I don't have anything to contradict that, really.
My other thing that adds to like why I feel like they are slightly careless about this character, right? They spent a lot of craft. I shouldn't even say they, because it's Anthony Hopkins who brought the craft to Hannibal Lecter. They didn't tell him. I think they mentioned that. They should mention that, right? In the commentary, the little like sound effect after like that he did that. He made that up on the fly. That's a him thing, right? That character is crafted by him as an actor, not by the people who made the movie. So the amount of care put into that is enormous, but the amount of care put into Buffalo Bill, I think, is purely dress, just like not dress like outfit, but like dress level, like a surface level. At one point, he's going through his room and he's like putting stuff away or getting something. I forget what he's doing. And you catch for a glimpse. This is what I was talking about earlier about stacked things, like stacked symbolism. He has swastika bed sheets. Why? Why does he have swastika bed? What about his character has ever told us that he's also a Nazi?
That's weird, yeah.
They're just adding things to him to make him a worse person. So I don't really think that they actually did put any care into him. And I think that they just tried to make something that the public at that age thought would be weird and creepy and uncomfortable. And I think that they were like, ooh, make him transsexual. That'll make people uncomfortable. But the swastikas are my final. That's my big tie-in, honestly. Unless the character in the book has like something going on like that and it's a call out to people who've read the book, then I can accept that, you know? But if it's just something that like they added into the movie to make him look worse, then
Yeah, I can see that. I do like the symbolism of how the moth and, you know, the whole
that's cool. Yeah.
being in a cocoon, how that comes up several times. There's like this painting of a butterfly in his house.
Which makes me think more that that he really had a real connection to being like to transitioning, but transitioning didn't exist in the way that it does today, in the way that people knew it today. I mean, it did. People did transition, but it wasn't in modern, you know, media. So of course they're not going to include that in a modern film, that you really could have just gotten transition surgery.
Yeah.
I don't know. To bring it to a little quick lighter note, I did have another question here. Let's see. It says, ask George how much he would need to get paid to tuck on film.
The whole notes of Devyn for this movie was all a big setup to get to this moment. I don't know, man.
Right. which it does actually lead into a bigger point. I promise. That does lead into a bigger point.
No, the situation is I'm not too uncomfortable with my body. I don't even think it would be that insane of an amount of money.
But it's not a representation of your body, really, is it?
It's like a representation of 99% of my body, and the things that are hidden are like the things that you usually hide.
But not in that way.
Not in that way, obviously, but it's still kind of as if you're just making a picture of yourself with, I guess super tight shorts on, like a
speedo,
or whatever they go. Yeah, like that. There's not that much of a difference in my mind between like me appearing on film in speedos and me appearing tucked in. I don't think that's that much worse.
But enough to warrant a little extra money.
Yeah, sure. They can give me a bit more.
So that does lead into
talking as if I was an actor and would ever appear in film.
That's your only appearance in film ever, and you tell your family, I starred in a movie. What movie? It's hard to find. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. You don't want to watch it, yeah.
You wouldn't even recognize me in the scene.
Just did it for the paycheck, yeah.
But that does lead into my bigger question, which is Hannibal Lecter's actor, you know, Anthony Hopkins, he came out on top of this movie. He is a renowned actor, considered one of the great classic film actors of that's still alive today. Yet, did he tuck in this movie? No, he didn't. Okay. Did he do weird affectations? Not really. He kind of just already kind of talks like that.
He definitely plays a character.
He does. He plays a little bit of a character, but if you've ever heard the guy who plays Buffalo Bill talk, and I'm saying the guy who plays because I'm guessing you don't know his name without looking it up. I don't. He doesn't talk like that, really. That's a huge, like, I'd like to fuck me. That's like a whole thing that dude's doing. Okay. But more so than that, it puts the lotion on its skin or else it gets the hose again. That line is more famous than the actor that plays the guy who says it. Do you know his name?
I had to check my intro where I mentioned him, but it is, just to point it out once more and say his name a second time at least, Simon Northwood.
Exactly. And it's a name that you literally have probably never had that come out of your mouth up until this day. Yeah. But the thing is that he is a fucking fantastic actor in this movie. It's something that I've seen a lot in older movies that happened a lot that will always perplex me, that I think is finally starting to change in horror today, is that the heel, it's a classic wrestling term for the person who plays the bad guy. The heel in a movie often is the better actor and is often the person doing really more acting. They are playing more of a character. They're more animated. They're doing more physical work. And they are often the lesser looked on actor. In classic horrors, 90s, even in 2000 horrors, it's always the lead who is like, the final girl or the lead person. That's the person who's important. You remember, Jamie Curtis. Everybody knows Jamie Lee Curtis, right?
Mhm.
But do you know the guy that, plays Michael? Do you? It's the same guy every film. It's something that is very apparent to me more in this movie because he's not behind a mask. This actor's really putting it on there.
Yeah.
And I think it's criminally sad that he did not get the same pull and the same recognition that Anthony Hopkins got in this movie.
Mhm. I still believe that Anthony Hopkins' performance is just as great. Like, I know he doesn't have like the big extravagant motions or like performance moments, but within what he has to do, the nuance is incredible. But I do also think
really
that Jodie Foster is just as great. Like all of all the three of them are fantastic.
They are all three fantastic. They are.
And I think there is this additional layer of Anthony Hopkins before this came just off The Elephant Man of David Lynch, which is a very, very opposite performance to this, but also incredible. I think he just had this kind of moment of, oh, it's another great performance by this guy, whilst he was already part of the zeitgeist at the moment. So that might have helped with him getting the status he has nowadays due to this film, compared to a Simon Northwood who might not have just had a second incredible performance a year earlier.
So you're going to really hate me, man. Simon Northwood did not play Buffalo Bill in this movie.
The fuck?
No, Simon Northwood played Buffalo Bill in the television series.
My God.
You're thinking of Ted Levine.
Ted Levine. What a pain.
And he was in a lot of other movies, He really did really good movies. He did Shutter Island, American Gangster, Manchurian Candidate, Memoirs of a Geisha. But he's also done shit like Fast and the Furious, Heat, and Jurassic World. He didn't, he's not had the best time after that movie.
I have one more note on the acting, actually.
Yeah.
Whilst we're on it, I think the general casting is incredible in this film, even beyond those three. At the point where Hannibal breaks out of this temporary new cage that he got, there's like a good 10 minutes where the camera just stays with the police force there in the building, trying to find him with the whole elevator scene and stuff like that. We just see side characters, basically. We just see basically extras of the movie that gotta carry a good 10 minutes of a film about 80 minutes into a film without like prior knowledge about those characters. And they so pull it off. You're not really thrown out of the movie, I feel like, due to that. And that's kind of incredible. Like on paper, that should be a horrible, horrible decision to make in a movie. But I think all of those just like extras or side characters just did such an incredible job at keeping the attention on their faces.
I think a lot of the older movies do a really good job of, how would I say? It's like new movies, modern movies, you need an extra. Okay, well, we need somebody that's going to not take the eyes off of the main character. So we need somebody that's like less stark looking features, less, muted person compared to the characters on screen or the main characters. And in the older movies, pre-90s and stuff, they were just like, I don't know, grab whoever will fucking come in on set, throw the sound guy in on there. He's got funny hair. Throw him on there. And like they all just, side characters just looked more like real humans, I feel like, in older movies.
I think, if I remember correctly, a lot of those of the police force were actually a theater company that Jonathan Demme knew. So that's how they got a lot of those.
That's still cool. Theater actors are closer to real humans than movie actors, that's for sure. My last little things here, I think, are he gets captured again, or not captured, he gets transferred, and he's in like that big cage. And him and Clarice have this huge ending, like their last monologue together, whatever, right?
Yeah, which ends with the only physical contact between them when he hands her the book or whatever, the notes, and he touches her finger. Oh.
It's that monologue back and forth where he is essentially profiling her.
Yeah.
And, telling her where she grew up and what she's done with her life or whatever, right? Is, again, a great iconic scene. But I feel like I have seen way too many movies and TV shows where literally somebody's like, looks at a character's like, I bet you're fresh out of junior high, blah, 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 blah. And like, they name off their whole life or whatever. And like, fucking Sherlock does that. Fucking like every detective, everything has done that since. And it was so cheesy. I felt like the whole scene was just so cheesy.
Even there, I'm more on the side of, I think this is one of the better cases that did it. I think the specific things he points out about her life and about her upbringing are all kind of continuations of the things he has been probing her in the last 3 consultation sessions. It's more detailed for sure, but it is not coming from nowhere. It's the exact things that he was asking her the whole time, and he's
well
just
done.
Come closer. Yeah.
It's well done. It's not that the way that they do it is cheesy. It's not that at all. It's that we've reached a point in our in media tropes, right? Where
just too oversaturated with it.
It's just not even that necessarily. It's that if a scene does that in a movie, they're actually going to make fun of it. It's going to be mocked. They're showing a character do that because they're showing like, oh, he's a fucking stupid know-it-all and he's actually going to be wrong or something. Or like, do you know what I mean? Like, it's a trope that's happened so much that the trope has actually been kind of flipped over. And now people are kind of, like, that's why it felt cheesy. Not because they do it cheesy, but because we've just done that so many times. It's like as if like she was running from a killer and she tripped a really good trip. Like it made sense where she tripped. She like slashed her ankle open. It was fucked up. It was well done. A chick still tripped while she was running away from a killer. It's still a trope. It's still cheesy. Like
your brain is too postmodern pilled
that
it can accept an earnest interpretation of that scene anymore.
A little bit, yeah, a little bit. And I like black and white movies and shit, so I'm definitely, I try not to be postmodern pilled, if you want to call living in the current era that. But postmodern pilled would have been another really great name for a podcast.
True.
That's what we call our episodes when we do just two new movies and nothing old. Something else that modern movies have kind of done is we've backed up our talk. If a movie talks the talk, it walks the walk is what we should try to do. And in this movie, it doesn't do that, where we talked about how he got out for a second and he mauled a person in seconds so fast that they couldn't like recover their eyeball. It was a terrible, gruesome scene, right? When he escapes in this one, he like fucks that guy up and all he does is like chew his like lip. He barely hurts that guy. That kind of bothered me.
I know what you mean, but on a logistical level, like what he's actually doing, like the whole nose thing, but with the one guy is just a kind of distraction. I would assume skinning a face of the other guy for his elaborate escape takes off most of the time, and he has to like focus on that to get that all done before people show up.
That's not what I mean. That's not what I mean. When they explained that he literally, because they said he literally got a hold of her for 5 seconds or whatever and like tore her face up, right? He held on to that guy and it's like a whole like 10 seconds of him chewing on that guy's face. They like focus on it, and it's a limitation of special effects and what they probably wanted to push as an R rating, really, and how gory they wanted to make their movie. But it's one of those things where they explained his character to be able to create this level of gore, this type of viscera, and then he doesn't actually do that. It's just,
I can see how that's kind of overhyped itself.
It's like in movies, like when somebody gets like an older movie when somebody gets shot with a shotgun, but it's just like red in their shirt and that's it. Do you know what I mean? Like the amount of what just happened doesn't match the amount of damage left, and it took me out, I think, again, only because of my what modern movies have done to me. I expect a fucking crazy wound there that's become so commonplace even in non-horror. The last thing I have, the switcheroo, where they realize that they're at the wrong house, right?
Yeah, I also have something on that, but before we get there, I'm gonna quickly go through like the few more cameos that I wrote down. The head of the FBI is played by Roger Corman.
That's amazing.
He just has a very little part, but that's super cool.
You're gonna tell me this movie ain't cheesy and Roger Corman's involved?
It can still, a serious movie can still have a wacky cameo. At the airport kind of situation where they have Anthony Hopkins caged up to like and carry him around on like two wheels. One of the FBI dudes there taking him is played by George Romero.
Oh, nice.
Which is also fun. And the final little thing is when the SWAT team supposedly surrounds them before the switcheroo, one of the SWAT team is the actual writer who wrote the adaptation.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. But yeah, here we arrive at the twist, I guess.
Yeah, so this is just something I really appreciate about the ever-changing state of film and what you can do with film and limitations as we progress through our history of time and film itself, is that like they realize they're in the wrong place. Unless you decide to make your film take place in the past, that scene could not happen anymore. Its tenseness, the whole thing that makes it scary, everything relies on the fact that they can't just fucking text her. They can't just fucking call her and be like, hey, yo, you were in the wrong house. And I think that's an interesting thing that it's very easily done, you know, in movies now where you just, well, I'll just make my movie take place in the 80s or the 90s or whatever, right? And that does have its own complications about aging a film. But I always like seeing that in movies that took place in that era and saying you could not modernize that. That moment would not work if you modernized it. So for all the things that I complain about what modern movies do that this movie doesn't do, or various things like that, that is something I really appreciate about this movie that you just cannot do with modern movies, is the whole fear and tenseness of not being able to communicate with each other from across huge distances.
Yeah. The one thing I wanted to just add towards that scene from my side is just how incredible the editing is. That's the real hero of that scene, in my opinion. The way it is paced and the way they take the time to set up multiple little shots leading towards this on both ends of this parallel story of these two houses being approached. My God, that's just a masterclass. That's pretty much a perfectly edited scene in my mind.
It is very well edited because, again, that exact switcheroo, we're at the wrong house, they're at the wrong house, or whatever, right? That is, again, also something that has been done hundreds and hundreds of times. I'm fairly certain that is literally how a season of Dexter ends. Another show about a serial killer.
Yeah.
Often you see it coming as it's leading up. You start, as that editing increases, you perceive, oh, they're at the wrong place. This one, you don't realize it until they bust through the door, and you're like, what? Yeah. And it's very well done. It does not like signal that it's happening.
And still, like, they even have little hints leading towards, like, you could pick up on the fact that we have seen the cellar and it's an enormous cellar. Like, that's a big fucking house. And the house the SWAT team is standing in front is really teeny tiny. Like, that would be, the cellar would be multiple times the size of the house. And the house she's standing in front of is a big house.
Yeah.
So we as a viewer even got like little hints towards it. And still, it's so well hidden, even from nowadays standards, with us being very susceptible to this trope. And so well edited that, yeah, it just creeps up on you and all of a sudden there it is. From one FBI serial killer movie that I defended against Devyn, we move on to a movie with a role reversal in Longlegs.
Longlegs is the new Osgood Perkins film for Neon. We follow FBI agent Lee Harker, played by Maika Monroe, as she investigates the serial killer Longlegs, played by Nick Cage, who, despite always leaving a handwritten letter, never seems to leave any trace of her being at the crime scenes. Everything starts off kind of Zodiac-esque, but begins to unfold into a mystery of much darker and otherworldly proportions. So, you did not care for this film as much as I did.
Indeed. I had a sort of interesting experience with this. I watched it with my brother. He kind of set up a outdoor cinema thing in the garden of my parents, and we watched it basically at midnight. So it was a great setting for a horror film. It was a lot of fun to watch it with him. And initially, I liked it quite a lot. He enjoyed it even more, so that helped me kind of get dragged along into the enthusiasm. And then we would have initially recorded this episode just half a day after that. And the episode might have turned out quite differently because I felt really good about it up until then. And the more time passes and the more I think about just like details and plot lines, the more I grow kind of frustrated with this movie. And I have way more issues now.
Okay. I'm excited to hear that because this movie is pretty sound plot-wise to me. I don't see a lot of plot holes or like issues. So that's interesting. This movie opens, you immediately meet Longlegs. And I think the first thing we have to talk about is the performance.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a huge fan of the actor, and I think that lends to me a little bit. I was always kind of straining almost to hear his normal voice come out. And like, if I didn't know this was him, would I be able to tell? And I think there are definite moments where you could clearly tell.
Yeah.
But for the most part, aside from the makeup could have used a little better work, the wrinkles were a little too like latexy looking and like looked like a mask or like a prosthetic. But other than that, man, he nailed this character. Holy shit. That opening, just his like almost birthday girl, like holy shit, is terrifying. This whole movie just opens hard as fuck with between that and like, you know, them seeing the first house and showing up to the door or whatever. This movie just opens hard. It just goes fast, and it's just I really liked how hard it hits.
I loved the opening. Most of my complaints are more so with where things lead.
Mm-hmm.
I love the way it is framed and edited in the beginning. I think the sound design is fairly like it's well done, but it wasn't like anything special. It was just like serviceable. But particularly the cinematography of the way the girl looks around, the way we look around on her eye level, basically. We are completely put into her position, into her shoes. The way the car first arrives and then we just see the empty car. The way he's just all of the sudden basically standing right next to her already, unexpectedly. Mm-hmm. And the way he is framed just with the head cut off.
Yeah, the head cut off is really big.
And we stay with that just bodily performance until he like ducks down, and just when his eyes come into frame, I think like the exact frame it happens, we cut away. And I think to opening credits at that point.
Yeah.
And all of that is incredibly well done. What an incredible setup for an antagonist.
And I do think it goes farther, and I'll go farther on. I think I actually have something to say as well about the cinematography and the framing and stuff that I normally wouldn't be talking about.
Lovely. Looking forward to that.
She's not just an FBI agent. If you've caught, this is like her first case.
Yeah.
I think that's really the big comparisons in these movies, besides really interesting killers, is this is a fledgling FBI officer in their first case, you know, woman alone on the case type thing.
Yeah, we also have the one scene where she does interrogate Longlegs himself.
She does, yeah.
That has parallels to the talks between Jodie Foster and Anthony Hopkins.
Yeah. You know, we both went into this pretty blind, I think, right?
Yeah.
I was really happy to find out that this wasn't just basically a rehash of Silence of the Lambs. In fact, all of the things that we were talking about that I felt like, oh, other movies have done this and it just feels old, weren't things this movie did. And I really appreciated that. I think that really helped my enjoyment with this coming directly off of watching The Silence of the Lambs.
Mm.
This movie immediately puts into question of reality. We are immediately told basically that this is an existence where they go, oh, you might be psychic. Okay. And like, they're just going to run with that. That is just going to be a thing we're going to work with. I fucking love this. This is a angle that I 100% can get on. If there's something more that I love than police drama, detective drama, horror type stuff, detective stuff, it's, fantastical horror things. If there's something I love both in those things, it's when you have real world type shit and they just act like supernatural shit is normal and it's not made out to be epic and crazy. It's just normal and like a part of reality. And where this isn't exactly like that, this is definitely like the FBI knows a little more than the average person does, and they've got like a special division that will test her on being psychic or whatever.
Yeah.
That's fucking cool to me though. That's like, that hits all of my cool buttons, honestly.
Yeah, my second note also relates to that. It's literally, I like the idea of this kind of psychic detective, but within a thriller horror setting instead of the classic PG Sherlock kind of crime thriller. I do love that setup. I do like how it's handled. That's just great world building. It's this nonchalant way of, if this already exists in this world, those people would be the first to know about it. So yeah, it makes sense that it's not a big deal to them. And that's super well done. Yeah, Totally agree.
With the world building, we also see it very early on. There's in the police office, the chief's office, or whatever you call it, there's a picture of the president on the wall. And at the time, it's the President Bill Clinton. So it's,
setting us in the 90s.
It's setting us in the 90s, which normally I would have just been like, okay. But I literally had just watched Silence of the Lambs, and I had just had this whole revelation about the end movie of that twist and stuff, right?
Yeah.
So foreshadowing, I kind of saw some twists coming that you couldn't use a cell phone for in this movie. Just because of that Clinton thing. I was immediately like, oh, they purposely put it in this time frame. But I do like that other than that, nothing about this movie overtly screams 90s, but it also doesn't betray. You could be told this takes place in the 90s and you wouldn't go, oh, what do you mean? It doesn't look like it. Mm-hmm. No, it does, but it doesn't scream it at you. And I really appreciate
casual
that.
90s look.
Yes.
Not like nostalgia grab. We're putting Tamagotchis everywhere.
Yes, exactly. It's like the perfect amount. Yeah. And I really, really appreciated that. Plot-wise, we're like, basically still that shooting has just happened. Very opening of the movie. Mm-hmm. She is then placed into the back of the squad car. This is the first time I noticed this in this movie. She becomes not embarrassed, but under the view of authority multiple times in this film, where she's either being grilled, questioned, or various other things. In this case, it's that she's in the back seat and the two cops are kind of talking to her about what just happened and being psychic and all this kind of shit, right? Mm-hmm. And it's making her uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And I think more than anything, it's making her feel childish. And this is reflected really strongly. If you look, the scene, the seat that she's in, it has to be actually wider than the car seat that the car is. Like it shows the scene from the side of the car, right? And you can see that she's in the middle seat and she has like maybe an arm's length on each side, maybe. And then it shows the camera located in the car looking straight at her in the back seat. And it's like she's on this huge fucking bench of a back seat. It is like they've made her very small in this shot. And there's a bunch of shots throughout the movie where she becomes embarrassed or she becomes scared or somebody's talking down to her and she becomes the smallest thing in the shot. And I think that is incredibly intentional on like superimposing the feeling of being a child or being in trouble.
I didn't pick up on the different scaling of the car seats, I guess. I did pick up on some parts where just through cinematography of where the camera is placed, she is definitely made out to be small or insignificant within a shot through cinematic language. Yeah, that I picked up on. But yeah, the car seat, that's great. That's lovely.
Yeah. And this movie just uses a lot of that kind of like basic visual inputs to translate things like that, like the size, making her look small. There's a couple scenes where I really wish I would remember what I wrote she was doing. She's standing against the corner, and her house has those like log walls. They're like the lines that run along the walls. You remember what I'm talking about? They're like almost like a log house or whatever.
Yeah.
The way she's standing in the corner and the angle of the camera is downward makes all of those lines lead to her head. And it's a moment she's having surprise, or like a moment she's realizing, oh, the guy is over there. Oh, this thing. And it's such a small visual thing to have what you call in photography, you call it leading lines, when you have lines that lead to the object or whatever. That's such a basic, like, first year photography skill that is used with great cinematic language that ties to what the character's feeling and doing at that moment. And I think that's what hit for me, is we see a lot of these movies that have really great visual language that I think add a layer to the film, but don't interact with that film in the same way. They don't like, they're not symbiotic to the character. In this movie, a lot of those scenes are symbiotic to how she's feeling. And I think that's really interesting.
Yeah. The biggest strength might be the cinematography. That just does so much heavy lifting in this. And my biggest general takeaway why I think it worked so well on the first run and initial like feeling is that the tonality it hits is just on point. Like the general feeling this movie portrays really works well for me. And the cinematography is definitely a big part of that. There's this scene that I wrote down early on that I loved, where she sits on the edge of the bed of the girl as she invites her to the birthday party. And just the way it is framed, she's also like a little awkward in the corner.
Yep, she's also shot as a little kid.
And the posture and the way she reacts, just that shot, just that imagery made both my brother and I laugh out loud. Like, it was so funny.
She asks if she'll go to her birthday party or whatever, right? She looks, not the kid, but the main character, looks up and like behind her-ish to the parents in the same exact way a little kid would look up to you waiting for an answer. And instead of saying to her, something, they answer for her to the little kid. They're like, of course she will. It's exactly how a parent-child interaction would have been. So yeah, no, she's totally being treated. It's even being emulated in their actions. I guess real quick, I'll just throw out a couple of the other times that were really stark to me that we see that happening is when she's going through all of the evidence and she falls asleep and he comes into the room and she's passed out. That room is huge only while she's sleeping. I am like 85% certain they are either using like I forget what that's called when you change focal points to make the background look wider. Do you know what I mean? Like when you do a zoom shot, that
the focal length, vertical zoom.
Yeah, either they're doing that with the room, or they're literally, the room is a different scale when she's standing in it versus when she's sleeping in it. Because when she's sleeping and he walks in, she is so tiny in the middle of that room, like a little kid that fell asleep on the floor. And then when she calls her mom and her mom asks, "Are you doing your prayers?" We're over her shoulder during the entire conversation. And then she asks, "Are you doing your prayers?" And the camera zooms out all the way into the corner of the room. And she's tiny. And she's like, "No, Mom, I'm not doing my prayers," or something like, or she's like, "Yes, Mom," or something like that. And like, becomes incredibly reserved and stuff. So I don't know. I liked all these things. And I really liked how much the cinematography interacts with the emotions of the character rather than just adding an artistic layer onto a film.
I have a few more things that I noticed that kind of fit into the whole being a child thing that aren't cinematography. Like another thing with the mother is the first call they have, they talk about her work. And I specifically wrote down how they talked about it, what's on your mind work stuff, nasty stuff. Like the way that is phrased is both a great kind of cute way how a mother would probably talk. Like I can definitely see moms all around the world kind of censoring themselves within that kind of situation, even to the adult children. But it also works in the thing of, for sure, to a child, you try to avoid nasty words and use words like nasty. And the scene where she receives a letter by Longlegs, it's also a birthday gift card for a child. I think it has the number 9 on.
I'm not sure what it is, but there's definitely some kind of symbolism between keeping the child safe, her safe as a child, getting sacrifices, blah, 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 and her remaining a childlike in those scenes, to the fact that later when her doll is discovered, etc., those zoom in or those zoom out shots that make her look small stop after that moment. You don't get any more of those in the movie after that. So there's some symbolism. There's something happening there that is representing the end of her childhood at that moment.
Yeah, you could say she was sheltered from the reality of her mother. You know, parts of growing up, parts of becoming an adult is seeing the flaws in your parents and that they aren't the perfect superheroes that you made them out to be for a pretty big chunk of your life. It's at that point of the story that she also finds out that her mother is directly involved in the murders and that part of her childhood was...
It's almost like that is the shattering of her childhood at the same time. Okay, so you're saying, yeah,
that is basically the shattering of her childhood.
I see what you're saying.
I feel like.
Okay. I got a note on Carrie Ann Camera's interview. I like her character, but it is such a comic book character. It's such a video game character. Like, she talks like a baby. Like, she uses baby words a lot and stuff. Do you know who I'm talking about? Which interview I'm talking about?
No.
She's the only girl to survive the killings that have happened, remember? And she's in she talks like a baby. But at the same time, she also words things incredibly articulately in a really Southern American kind of, not South American, Southern America kind of way. Like, she says something like, what if I killed you and the blood came out your eyes or something like that. But she says it done you up in the back of the head until the blood be filling up, or till the blood all up in your eyes out or something like that, bleeding all of your eyes. She just words things she's such a weird character that doesn't, I don't know. That's the one character that bothered me the whole movie. I liked her character, but it was almost cartoony compared to everybody else. It's interesting to me that Longlegs, the guy, at least he's a normal person still underneath all of that. You get to see his bedroom, and he's on his bed reading a book, and he's got band posters and shit on the wall.
I would assume those are what's the hair metal?
Hair metal, yeah.
Yeah, because his character is very directly inspired by a specific hair metal singer that I forgot to write down.
Is it Dee Snider? Because Dee Snider is a famous hair metal singer who also made a horror movie and wore whiteface in it and looked very much like this guy.
I don't think it was.
At that point in the movie, when we see that, we don't know what's going on exactly. And the way that they accept her psychicness and stuff, and that this killer is killing people without being ever in the room, and they just accept that, let's figure out how it works. It almost makes it feel like he's some type of paranormal entity,
Mm-hmm.
So seeing him just read a book on his bed with band posters behind him, I was just he's got a lot of interests for a paranormal entity. You never hear the ring girl going to get her nails done, so I just thought that was really interesting that they kind of humanize him for a small moment.
To me, that kind of leans into territory that I already have problems with. Everything we mentioned so far is just great establishing stuff. The opening of not really showing his face is the Jaws. He's the shark, and it's his absence that's scary about him. the characterization of she's this small child, like that's all great setup.
Yeah.
We haven't even mentioned anything about the whole Zodiac thing, because it is so irrelevant to everything happening in this movie, I feel like. The only thing it's there for is, I guess, that they realized it's satanic because Satanists use that lettering, I guess. But that felt like it's establishing something that will lead somewhere, and it really doesn't. The whole.
Well, I think the writing. I think the writing is a barrier. I don't think the writing is supposed to establish later things. I think it's a barrier. I think it's supposed to be just there, literally, to lock them out of further investigation and discovering who he is. So when they crack that code, that allows the story to move farther in plot. So I don't think it doesn't have a further reason that evolves into anything, but its functionality exists within the structure of a story for a good reason.
Yeah, I get that it is a plot device actively in the story, and that is a complaint, in my opinion. Like, it is just there as a barrier, just as a bump in the road, so that our guys have something to do for a while, but it has no purpose beyond that. And that's just, like, I hate when stuff is just there to drag out the time, I guess, for the big reveal
Well,
later.
if it makes you feel better, right? Nobody can decode it, right? Up until her.
Yeah.
Okay. How does she decode it?
I guess through their connection that they already have, because she's the little child.
That's not definitely how I would say she decoded it. I would say that the devil told her what the letters meant.
Okay, yeah. To me, Longlegs is basically like a mouthpiece for the devil in this universe. So
100%, he is. Anybody under the devil's control becomes the mouthpiece. When she goes to her partner's family, boss or whatever he is, and that whole scene happens, right? They're all mouthpieces for the devil at that moment, except for the mom, right? They're all just being puppeted through the devil, right? But that's like the whole thing of the movie, is that her psychicness, her knowing all that shit, is just her being puppeted through the devil too. She is still also just a puppet for the devil until that link is broken and, she loses that small childishness or whatever.
Yeah.
So, like, no, that's why nobody could solve it. That is its whole link, is that is showing you that she is just as connected as all those other people are to the devil.
Yeah, I guess that's something. It still sets it up to be a kind of puzzle to be solved, and it's just getting solved. Like, there's nothing further to it. The whole way when we first see Nick Cage fully is the scene where he's just in the car, and I think like singing wrongly to a song on the radio or something. That was another one where I thought like, okay, it's like, yeah, you had that great setup for him. You had the great, we're not going to show him yet. You had to build tension for it and a great atmosphere surrounding that. And this is now your like big moment of the reveal. It's like,
I love that.
What does...
I love that.
It was really underwhelming to me. It wasn't a thematic payoff. Like, the song didn't bring me anything. I don't know why that was. The acting alone is great, yeah, but he's acting towards nothing. There isn't anything. Like, why are we present even in that moment?
Well, because
we don't fulfill
we're seeing him, right, for who he is. We're getting a reveal. We're getting not just a reveal, we're getting the reveal. We're seeing this guy. We're getting an idea of who he is as a person. The music he listens to is not music anybody else fucking listens to. He is a loner, an outcast, a fucking weirdo. And we are being presented that by him singing to himself badly to a song nobody fucking knows. But at the same time, we're being shown that this dude is still just a person. We're establishing that. And I think that is almost more terrifying when that is your big bad killer, is just the same dude who also shops at the, you know, same shops you do type thing, and like sings in his car, and you would not expect him to be a psychopath. So I think it's, I don't know. I kind of like, I like the mundaneness of that scene. I like that.
To me, those are kind of like two different approaches that just didn't merge well. Like either you could go the route of the mysterious, we don't know anything about him, we barely get to see him ever, he's like this great unknown, which that's how they started off. Or you go it's just another human, and you know, he's doing his everyday thing, and at each moment he could like turn around and start killing someone. Like that's to me like two different approaches for a villain, and they try to do both, and it doesn't match in my brain.
For me, it was like a switcheroo type thing. You think that he's this big ominous thing, and then you find out that he's really just another guy.
Yeah.
And I really liked that personally. I like that he's not the final boss.
To me, the whole thing feels like it just takes too much of a turn and hasn't the things it established early on, it kind of abandons, and the things it wants to become, it hasn't really established.
See, I don't know if I agree. I feel like everything's laid out there when you think about it again. Like in the very beginning, you see him approach them. You see all of that, all of her reservedness with her mom, all of that kind of leads up to this idea of like she's distanced herself from her, and she's like, you know, protecting her and shit, and like the prayers and it's
yeah, I know, it's like it's mentioning religion, it's mentioning the things briefly, but it feels so surface level to me. Like it didn't comment on anything religion. It just mentioned, okay, she has kind of this history with religion. Then religion turns out to be a bigger point in the plot of, oh, it's actually Satan, quite literally. It's not like a metaphor or anything. No, it's literally Satan. So, okay, religion played a part in it. And now? Do you have anything to say about that? Do you have anything to... I don't know, it's super surface.
Well, but does it need
to
have anything to say? Does it have to? What would that have added to the movie to like have a deeper meaning about religion? It would have been like I think pretentious to the point of the film of being like a film about terror.
I disagree. The terror of real situations and of how our world interacts with those. Like body horror is to a huge degree based on pregnancy, you know? Like a lot of it is...
I mean, some...
Yeah, a lot of it. I'm not saying it needs to be, but a lot of it. And that works great due to that relation in those parts. Like you can definitely do such a thing and have meaning behind it. A Zodiac kind of mystery plot can be a plot point and still have additional meaning behind it. And here it's all just like, okay, it's all plot points. It's nothing has meaning behind it almost. Like, yeah, the childhood stuff is the deepest part about it for sure. But yeah, I don't know. It felt empty to me.
I like that because it's like, you know, what is more evil than just being evil without further reason of being evil? Nothing. That is the most evil you can be, is just to be senselessly evil. And that is what the devil is supposed to be, is just senselessly fucking evil. He just does this to be a fucking bad guy. I respect movies that have like a deeper meaning and a deeper purpose, or a thing they're trying to make a point of or say on. But it's like food, you know, where I love to have like a homemade meal. There are days where I want like a fucking cheese sandwich, man, you know, because it just sounds good. There are days where like I like my movie to just be like upfront about what it is. Mm-hmm. This is just a movie about the devil.
The final real thing that is also where it didn't go, which I kind of expected it. Like I already pointed out that the atmosphere does so much for me here. And with it being so strong on the atmosphere early on and being so abstract with the things happening in the universe, I almost expected it to stay kind of vague and to not give us answers and just be about the feeling of terror and the feeling of, oh, this is the unknown. You will never figure out what the fuck is going on. And this just not being aware of what is the danger might be a like big culmination of this all. And the way it ends up, even with like we get an explanation for everything, you know, every little,
Well, not everything.
I feel like almost everything, like the way they are connected.
What is the ball? The metal ball that's in each of the dolls' heads that like allows them to be controlled. What is that?
He said it's a part of himself, or I guess the man downstairs that's put into them.
Yeah, but that's not like explained. That's like magic and shit. That's not like thoroughly explained. You don't get like that wrapped up. It's still this vaguity that like how does somebody become contracted with the devil in such a way? Like there's a lot of things. I think
those are plot details of how did this come to be. Like it doesn't give us the prequel and the sequel. But from this contained story, I feel like I get way too many answers and they just aren't as satisfying as anything that I could have made it out to be in like being left in a mystery. Like a lot of it, I don't know, it's just so contradictory, the way the movie sets itself up to be and the way it tries to pay off on everything. I feel like it's a mishmash that the longer I think about it, the more I dislike it.
That's craziness. That's so crazy. I love the wrap up. I'm not a fan of vague endings that kind of leave you out in the open and shit. I like when things are wrapped up and you have a slight understanding. You know what I mean?
I do like it at times when it makes sense to me in the movie, and here I feel like the movie set up for something else and then tried to become that. And it was an unsatisfying turn.
I liked it. I liked it a lot. I wonder how many things I missed that led up and there were hints that this was already happening throughout the movie. Once in the window, I caught it in like a window walking by of a car. It was the window of a car. And then once when they slammed the door and you can see the shadow on the glass, but you can see the devil a couple times in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember either of those?
I think I caught it once in a window.
But yeah, there's at least 2 times where you see like a shadowed mass with big horns and shit.
Mm-hmm.
And like the wings or whatever, you can like see that like in places. So I wonder how early in the movie they're dropping those hints that it is the devil. As we must do every podcast, there must be a cultural difference question. And this one is that when she goes to bring her mother in for questioning, she goes into her mom's house and the TV is like blaring loud. Did that mean anything to you? Do you know that song?
It seemed like just 90s television show is starting, but I couldn't tell you what show that is.
I mean, of course it is. Of course that is. It is very much a 90s TV show, and it is the intro for that 90s TV show. That show is also from the 80s. It's also from the 70s. It's also still playing right now.
Okay.
It is a very long-running, very strong part of our TV history in America. That is the theme or opening for the TV show The Price is Right.
Okay, I almost expected it to be that because anytime it's like a long-running TV show in anything American, it's always The Price is Right.
So do you get it? She made a deal with the devil to keep her kids safe.
Okay.
At the price was right. That was the right price for her to do this thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's cool.
So I thought that was a really cool. I thought that was a cool little hang up. I honestly, because I'm not good at this game of finding these little symbolisms and shit, and I've found a bunch in this one. I feel like I think there's a lot. I think there's actually a lot in this movie. I think this needs a rewatch by me eventually because I think there's a lot of deep shit here. I love cult and satanic shit in movies when it's done really well, and grew up with Stigmata, the movie Stigmata. I don't know if you've ever seen that. It's a religious superstition that somebody suddenly starts going through the effects of Jesus. So they start bleeding from their hands and feet. And it's about a woman who's not religious at all. She's like a punk rock tattoo artist lady, and she starts going through it. And it's like a horror movie, but talks a lot on religion and what religion means and what it means to be religious and like what faith is about in modern times and all this kind of shit. And it's a very poignant, very well made movie. I don't want any more of those. I want movies where the devil comes through and fucking it's just madness and scary and fucking the devil's scary because the devil's scary, yo. And I liked that about this movie, honestly. I thought that was, I'm happy that it didn't have a big like overall meaning type thing.
I can just kind of repeat something that I said about Dark Crystal last episode, where I feel like all of the things you mentioned are in no way in conflict of also having additional layers and also being a well-crafted, round project. And I feel like this wasn't. I just want to quote one thing that I read somewhere else that really encapsulated my feeling in a better way than I could phrase it. Angelica Bastian, I think she's a author for The Vulture. She wrote an essay, Longlegs and America's Horror's Inability to Speak to the Moment. And I wanted to quote that one line that I really felt. But all that atmosphere and grotesque visual splendor feels remarkably inert due to the stories merely glide on the surface of intrigue and lack of kind of characterization that can lead a horror film to hook you in its most tender parts. And yeah, I couldn't have ever put it that well, but that's exactly how I feel.
That is fair. I will remember this as well as remembering that you think that all children's movies need a good plot.
To be a great, like, you can make mid movies and still make money with that. Like, it's a matter of what's your aim here. The Minions never tried to be a critically acclaimed movie, and I get that. That was just a giant cash grab, you know, and that's still, you can define that as a successful children's movie because children fucking love that shit. And it was super successful. It made enormous amounts of money. Everyone's happy. But I will still say it's a bad movie. You know?
I think a good kids movie is a movie kids like, and that's what makes a good kids movie. On the defense of the Minions, I have figured out why the Minions are loved. I've figured it out. It's Jackass for kids.
Oh, that makes sense, yeah.
It's literally just Jackass for little kids, dude.
Yeah, fair enough. I also won't give a Jackass movie 10 out of 10.
Ah, you're ridiculous. If you are thoroughly entertained for 2 hours, how is it not a 10 out of 10?
But yeah, there is again our core differences in how we approach cinema.
Yeah. But yeah, I love this movie. I'm definitely going to be probably rewatching this in the next week with my wife. This just filled my week so perfectly. This was on par with everything I think I needed this week as far as the film went.
That's great. For the next appointment, we are moving away from horror and to coming-of-age films revolving around skateboarding.
Our first prescription is mid-90s from 2018. It is the directorial debut of Jonah Hill. Taking place in 1996, this coming-of-age film follows a 13-year-old boy as he connects with an older crowd through skateboarding. The film stars Sonny Suljic, Lucas Hedges, and Catherine Watterson.
Your second prescription is the new 2024 released Dìdi. It is the semi-autobiographical feature debut by director Sean Wang, following the Taiwanese-American boy Chris Wang's coming-of-age set in 2008. With skateboarding and internet culture as a backdrop.
If you don't want to get spoiled for either of these films, make sure to check them out by the next episode 2 weeks from now.
I'm George.
I'm Devyn, and this was Medicinema, your healthy dose of film.